this chapter, we're going to focus on the following 10 key words: hardy, fluctuate, ordain, overture, persist, gruesome, wayward, stifle, indifference, and status. Let's start with the first key word, hardy. If you look at the picture, you can see the cacti growing in places where other plants find it difficult to thrive. But what does that tell you about the cacti as plants? Does that mean that they are hardy? Can we say that? Or what is the meaning of hardy? Let's find out. Hardy is an adjective. Plants that are hardy are able to survive cold weather. So it is different from the picture. The cacti survive hot weather, but the idea is similar. For example, the silver-leaved varieties of cyclamen are not quite as hardy. And hardiness is the uncountable noun from hardy. For example, the hardiness of other species that have blue flowers. But that's not all about hardy. Hardy can also be used in different contexts. People and animals that are hardy are strong and able to cope with difficult conditions. For example, hardy antelope wander in from the desert. And not all animals can live in the desert, so you can tell that this animal is strong and can cope with difficult conditions. And again, the uncountable noun from hardy is hardiness. For example, the hardiness, endurance, and courage of my companions. And synonyms for hardiness are the words resilience, fortitude, toughness, and robustness. And finally, if you describe a group of people as hardy, you mean that they have been very patient or loyal, or have been trying hard to do something in difficult conditions. For example, the 10 hardy supporters who had made the trek to Dublin from Riga. So the next time you remember the picture of the cacti, remember the word hardy and what it means. And now for the next key word, fluctuate. Now if you look at the picture, you can see a graph. Now there is no one pattern we can use to describe the graph we have here. We can see that there are some points that are high, some points that are low, high again, low again. So can we say that the points in the graph fluctuate? Is that the meaning of fluctuate, going up and down? Let's find out. Now, fluctuate is a verb, and if something fluctuates, it changes a lot in an irregular way, just like the graph we saw. For example, body temperature can fluctuate if you are ill, or the fluctuating price of oil. That means they change a lot in an irregular way. And synonyms for fluctuate are the words change, swing, vary, and alter. And the noun from fluctuate is fluctuation. For example, don't worry about tiny fluctuations in your weight because they're just tiny. They're not big. If they're big, you should worry. And synonyms for fluctuation are the words change, shift, swing, and variation. So the next time you remember this graph, remember the word fluctuate and what it means. And now for the next key word, ordain. And in the picture, we can see a Christian priest, and it seems like the word ordain has to do with religious things. But is it related to religious things in general, or is it related only to Christianity? Let's find out. Now, ordain is a verb. When someone is ordained, they are made a member of the clergy in a religious ceremony. For example, he was ordained a Catholic priest in 1982. And synonyms for ordain are the words appoint, call, name, and commission. And ordain can be used in a different context as well, other than the one we saw in the picture. If some authority or power ordains something, they decide that it should happen or be in existence. For example, Nehru ordained that socialism should rule, or his rule was ordained by heaven. So the next time you remember the picture of that priest, remember the word ordained and what it means. And now for the next key word, overture. Now we look at the picture, we can see it's a soccer game and it looks like the kickoff. That means the beginning of the game, or at least the beginning of the second half. So if we want to link that to the word we have here, which is overture, do you think that this word has to do with soccer, or does it have to do with the beginning of things? Let's find out. Now, overture is a countable noun. An overture is a piece of music, often one that is the introduction to an opera or play. For example, The program opened with the overture to Wagner's Flying Dutchman. An overture can also be used in a different context. If you make overtures to someone, you behave in a friendly or romantic way towards them. For example, he had lately begun to make clumsy yet endearing overtures of friendship. So the next time you remember this shot from the soccer match, remember the word overture and what it means. And now for the next keyword, persist. Now, if you look at the picture, you can see there is a snail. And the one thing we know about snails that they are very slow. It's not because they are very slow, but because they're very small and the mechanics of their movement doesn't allow them to be fast. But on the other hand, if you think about it, a very short distance from our perspective as humans is a marathon to snails, but they go the distance anyway. They don't stop, even if it is difficult and they're always at risk, but they do it anyway because that's their way of life. Couldn't we say that they persist? What is the meaning of persist? Let's find out. Persist is a verb. If something undesirable persists, it continues to exist. For example, contact your doctor if the cough persists, if it continues to exist. And persist can be used in a different context, which is closer to the image we just saw. If you persist in doing something, you continue to do it even though it is difficult or other people are against it. For example, why does Britain persist in running down its defense forces? And synonyms for persist in this context are the words persevere, continue, go on, and carry on. So the next time you remember this picture of the snail, remember the word persist and what it means. And now for the next keyword, gruesome. If you look at the picture, you can see a helmet and it's a soldier's helmet. Now obviously this is a symbolic picture that reminds you of the time of wars, especially World War I and World War II. Now I didn't pick a picture that would be more representative of the word gruesome, but only a symbolic picture that goes back to that period. So what do you think the word gruesome is about? Is it about war or the horrors of war or something else? Let's find out. Now, gruesome is an adjective. Something that is gruesome is extremely unpleasant and shocking, like all the scenes people used to see in wars. For example, there has been a series of gruesome murders in the capital. It is not any murder. Murder is always gruesome, but if it is extremely unpleasant and shocking, we can call it gruesome. And synonyms for gruesome are the words horrific, shocking, terrible, and awful. And we can say gruesomely as an adverb. For example, he has spent periods in prison where he was gruesomely tortured in a very unpleasant and shocking way, something that your mind can never accept. So the next time you remember this soldier's helmet, remember the word gruesome and what it means. And now for the next key word, wayward. Now, if you look at the picture, we can see a man and probably his son. But if you look closer at the picture, you can see that the boy has taken all the cereal and left nothing for his father, which is a little selfish, I would say. So does that have to do with the word wayward? Let's find out. Now, wayward is an adjective. If you describe a person or their behavior as wayward, you mean that they behave in a selfish, bad, or unpredictable way and are difficult to control. For example, we can say wayward children with a history of severe emotional problems. And wayward children, we mean selfish, bad, or unpredictable. And synonyms for wayward are the words erratic, unruly, willful, and unmanageable. We can say waywardness as a noun. For example, the curiosity, caprice, and waywardness of children. So the next time you remember this picture coming from the breakfast of the father and his son, remember the word wayward and what it means. And now for the next key word, stifle. Now if you look at the picture, we have a little girl in the middle and we have fingers pointed at her. Well, that's a very bad thing to do. She's just a little girl. All she needs is a little encouragement, not people putting her down all the time. Now, these fingers could belong to her parents, her teachers, her peers maybe, but it is definitely not a good thing to do. Do you think that has to do with the word stifle? Let's find out. Now, stifle is a verb. If someone stifles something you consider to be a good thing, they prevent it from continuing. And that is a negative word we use to show our disapproval. For example, regulations on children stifled creativity. It stopped creativity from continuing because they have a lot of rules. And that is one thing you can see in schools all around the world, which is a sad thing. But anyway, going back to stifle, we have synonyms for it, and these words are suppress, repress, prevent, and stop. And stifle can also be used in a different context. If you stifle a yawn or laugh, you prevent yourself from yawning or laughing. For example, she makes no attempt to stifle a yawn. She doesn't stop it. When it comes, she lets it pass without trying to stop it. Or his hand shot to his mouth to stifle a giggle. And synonyms for stifle in this context are the words restrain, suppress, repress, and smother. And there's more to stifle. We can also use it in a different context. If you stifle your natural feelings or behavior, you prevent yourself from having those feelings or behaving in that way. For example, it is best to stifle curiosity and leave birds' nests alone. Well, maybe this is one of the situations where we need to stifle our curiosity because we're hurting those little birds. But it would be a very bad idea in almost any other situation. So the next time you remember this picture with the little girl in the middle and all those fingers pointing at her, remember the word stifle and what it means. And now we come to the next key word, indifference. Now, if you look at the picture, you can see the old gentleman trying to point out something, and the girl seems to be interested. But if you look at the young man, you can see that he does not care or he's somewhere else. Can we say that this is a sign of indifference? But what is indifference? Let's find out. Now, indifference is an uncountable noun. If you accuse someone of indifference to something, you mean that they have a complete lack of interest in it. For example, we can say a look in his eyes of utter indifference. It seems like he's not interested at all. And synonyms for indifference are the words disregard, apathy, lack of interest, and negligence. So the next time you remember this picture of that old gentleman trying to say something to these two people, remember the word indifference and what it means. And now for the last key word for this chapter, status. If you look at the picture, we have medals. We have the first, the gold, the silver, and the bronze medal. Well, obviously, we know that these things are usually obtained by joining competitions and winning or being in the top 3 places. But how does that relate to the word status? Let's find out. Now, status is an uncountable noun. Your status is your social or professional position. For example, the fact that the burial involved an expensive coffin signifies that the person was of high status, and that means a high social or professional position. Another example, her former status as a vice president of the Spanish Athletics Federation, and that was also a professional position. Synonyms for status in this context are the words position, rank, or grade. And status can also be used in a different context. Status is the importance and respect that someone has among the public or a particular group. For example, nurses are undervalued and they never enjoy the same status as doctors. And status here means the importance and respect. Another example, he has risen to gain the status of a national hero. But that's not all about status. The status of something is the importance that people give it. For example, those things that can be assessed by external tests are being given unduly high status. And status can also be used in a kind of like a legal term, but it's not exactly. A particular status is an official description that says what category a person, organization, or place belongs to and gives them particular rights or advantages. For example, the WHO recommendation has no legal status, while the WHO is the World Health Organization. Another example, the personal allowance depends on your age and marital status. And that's a word we find in every single form we fill, the marital status. It's the place where we say if we're single, married, or divorced. And finally, the status of something is its state of affairs at a particular time. For example, She prepared a status report on the project. Or we can say, what is your current financial status? And synonyms for status in this context are the words state of play, development, progress, and condition. So the next time you remember the picture of the metals, remember the word status and what it means. And that's all for this chapter.